Hi Bookfest story writers, it's really good to see you. I'm getting even more excited this week because I think you may have started to think about writing your very own book. Have you? Have you started writing in it? Have you come up with the ideas yet? Well, this week we're going to help you come up with the ideas and how to form them into a story. I don't know about you, but I often come up with a good idea for a character or where I want a story to happen, but then trying to wind it all into a great big story and exactly what happens when and how it ends is the tricky bit. So I wanted to show you a book here that I've had for a really long time. It's a myth or a legend about McCool, a giant, and how the Giant's Causeway in Ireland was made. It's a really funny story. And it happens between Scotland and Ireland, and the two giants have an argument and start throwing stones at each other, and they end up building the Giant's Causeway. Have a look about it, it's really interesting. So I just wanted to show you the back of this book because I think this is a really good, fun way of starting to build up your ideas of what your story is going to be about and what happens in it. So here, there's not much writing, it shouldn't take you very long, but there's some pictures that tell you that there's one giant shouting and throwing a stone at the other one, and then the other one, you can just see him far away on the other side, starts throwing stones back, and then one comes to show how strong he is and he can carry a house, and then one pretends to be a baby, and the story goes on until they trick each other and they build the Giant's Causeway, and then they live happily ever after. If you've read the story, the planning makes sense. Lots of stories would easily fit into that picture planning idea. I think most people know Stickman, about a stickman who leaves his family home and then keeps getting picked up by different people and animals, and he ends up going all the way out to sea, and then he gets washed up on a beach, and slowly but surely he finds his way back home to his family. You can imagine planning a simple story like that using a simple picture story planner just to get some ideas going. So as a first point this week, you can have a go at doing a picture story planner. Of course, you can add some words and some detail, thinking about what's going to happen and when in your story, just to get some ideas going. It might be that you have to have 2 or 3 goes at something like this before you come up with your ideas and exactly what's going to happen when you write your book. Another thing that really helps with stories is where. Do you remember last time we were talking about the person that wrote your story, and it's sometimes really good to know a bit more about them and who they are. It helps you to understand them. Sometimes finding out about where your story happened really helps you to get into it as well. And the same for when you're writing your story. So if we can think of where it's going to happen and what's going to happen in it, that can help too. This story is about the war, and so there's a map here of parts of France where the war happened and different rivers and names of places. So it might be that your story happens in a real place. Lots of books have got maps and places, and it helps you when you're reading them. This is by Piers Torday, who's a friend of Bookfest, and here's his map of where his story happens. And when I was reading this story, I kept going back to this all the time to find out where the characters were and where they might be going next. A very famous story here, the Narnia stories, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and other stories by C.S. Lewis, take place in a land called Narnia. And in a lot of his books, you see the maps of Narnia and where the children in the stories travel to. Again, it's really nice to be able to picture some of that and see where they might be going and where the mountains or the rivers are. Lots of authors use maps. Here's a Michael Morpurgo book. I think we've all heard of him. And he's from the Isles of Scilly, and often his stories have parts of those in them. And here is a map of the islands, the Isles of Scilly, so you can have some idea of how big they are, where they are, the sea that is around them. And other maps are of towns and more complicated places with lots and lots of detail. So something else you could do is have a go at mapping out your story and thinking about the places that your characters go and why they go there. So we're going to give you some plans. This is an island off the coast of Canada. You could find your own outline for an island if that's the kind of place your story might happen, and see if you can plan and lay out what's going to happen and where. It might be that it happens in a town, so you might want to plot out your story or draw on of your own. As well as those kind of ways of coming up with ideas, sometimes stories have got real things in them. This book is about Alba, the 100-year-old fish, and in the back of the book there's lots of information about other fish that live in the sea. So it might be as part of your planning and your ideas that you're doing some research, and you could write some of that down and include it in your book. This story, The Indian in the Cupboard, is about a little tiny red Indian, and the author has included some information about the Iroquois Indians. And it might be, again, if you're going to find an interesting character in your story that you don't know much about but you'd like to include it, you need to do some research, and you could include that as part of your planning. We'd love to hear about some of your ideas, and it gets us really excited to see what we're going to be reading when you hand your books in when they're all finished. So this week, have a go at planning a story, sketching it out, pictures, writing, maps, information, something that's going to help you really get that story down on paper. See you soon, guys. Can't wait to read them.